disciplined at that point. There's no way.
Good morning and welcome to the Thursday, July 11th meeting of the Wastewater Committee. At this time, we'll now stand and pledge the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Vice Mayor Everson.
Here.
Councilmember Matt.
Here.
Public comment. Though this is the time members of the public who wish to discuss matters that do not appear on the agenda. If there's anyone who wishes to address the City Council or the Wastewater Committee, is there anyone here who wishes to address the committee at this time? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. On to our regular agenda. Item number 1, PERC Water Report Review.
Brett, before you begin, we do have Councilor Atland in the room. He's allowed to attend but not able to speak. Otherwise, then we have a quorum of a council, which would be a violation of Brown Act. And just wanted to point that out. We had another councilor a couple of meetings ago. It was the same situation. He could attend, was not allowed to speak. He chose to leave because he had other work to do.
Very good.
Okay.
Okay. All right, PERC Water Report Review.
This is kind of in terms of the committee. Council assigned this to the committee. PERC has been sending their daily reports, which I have been forwarding to you. And what PERC is looking for is some feedback in terms on what the committee wants to hear or see in the reports, and then recommend to council in terms of how reports should be adjusted.
Okay, very good. I guess we start out first with contractually, what are they obligated to report on?
It just has to do monthly asset reports.
Okay.
Doesn't really tell exactly what needs to be in them, but we kind of follow a template.
Okay.
With flows, the reports, get sent to the state, some maintenance activities,
Okay.
things like that.
State requirements and, okay, that's one, okay. Thanks.
And the asset report is this report, correct? That's the one
No.
we just recently were receiving?
No.
That is the
Maintenance report?
maintenance report.
Okay.
The asset report, I believe
It's this
last
one.
is, yes, I believe that.
Activities.
Activity summary and all of
Yes.
that, yeah.
Yes, and I have 3 others, but I was going to wait to see exactly what you guys wanted before I sent them in
Okay.
to fine tune it to what you're looking for.
Okay.
What do the 3 others have in them that's different from what you're currently sending? What's in the current report?
Basically nothing
Okay, so
They're-
it's
they're
a
all-
rehash of the same information.
per month, correct?
Okay, and your, the daily summary reports that we're getting of activity, I believe Councilmember Rhodes wanted to see if we could get some time as to how much time you were spending in each location.
That's not part of a regular log that takes place at a wastewater facility.
Okay,
I think what we're trying to get to is we're trying to get kind of a snapshot of the activities out of the wastewater plant. Part of 2 things. One is that we know here in a short little bit, we're going to be running the whole system ourselves without, there'll be CDCR wastewater, but no RSO water coming in. And we're trying to figure out, for one, what we need to do as far as a contract, if we need to change it, redo it, go in-house. We're trying to get an idea of what all the activities are that surround the wastewater operation, so that when we get to the point of making those decisions, we have a little better idea of what's going on and what's going to be needed on our end. And we're trying to basically, it's a kind of long-term evaluation of, not it's like performance per se, but
no, it's manpower really.
Right.
I mean, we're looking for
Needs are
what
gonna be-
manpower is needed in what durations, in which areas. So is it possible for them to put, arrived wastewater, log what they did, and then departed at the time they left? Would that be reasonable?
Yes, it's the
Okay.
same every day,
yeah.
except for the leaving time.
Yeah, as long as, the activities in between are listed, that's great. But we're looking for manpower and time, basically. How much time are we gonna have is devoted to each section, what it is they're doing, how often, is that amount of manpower needed, those kinds of things.
'Cause we also know too that, I mean, some seasons are really busy and some are kind of slow, and some are just, maintenance and monitoring, I think. I mean, that's what we're trying to figure out, those, for our end,
That's
so we
right.
know what we're talking about when we're talking about it. A little more in depth, if that helps at all. Any other questions there?
Not with that one, no, that's
Okay,
good.
public comment?
Good morning. For the next
Morning.
wastewater meeting, I'd like to request that the actual per contract be brought forward and reviewed. I'm
To
finding,
what end?
well, I'm finding it hard to believe that after the number of years Councilman Epperson's been on the wastewater board, that he would ask what is required under the contract. Perhaps we should bring that forward and say, here are the requirements of the contract compared to what we have received. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Item number 2, no other discussion.
No, just so that, I have a meeting scheduled with PERC on the, the maintenance report for Friday.
Okay, very good. In-house sewer operation discussion.
Yes, Chairman. We have been compiling some information related to in-house operations, related to employee salary, capital improvement, insurance, operational costs. We're hoping to have something to you by the end of the calendar year. I believe the contract extension with PERC expires next year, if I remember correctly. So we want to have something to you by the end of the year to review, and then have council look at and decide where they wish to go. This is more of an updated item in terms of, the council identified this as part of their goals for the coming year. So we just kind of want to give you an update that we are moving forward on this. And this is our approximate time frame to present a report to council.
Okay.
And that'll be the full report. We won't, in between, we're going to have.
In between the
we'll be
committee,
reporting during the committee,
yeah, we'll be
right.
talking as a committee, but to the entire council.
Right.
I'm looking at the end of the
Okay.
year.
Okay. And not to back up too far, but to also, part of I guess the information that we need is like, and we know PERC's got a lot of other, assets involved besides just the guys that are on the field there, but if you need like more in-depth information from a specialist, so that stuff's kind of useful to us, because we're looking at operations, but also, the information that other people know, the knowledge, I guess, that comes to help run the plant more efficiently. Does that make sense? I mean, it's like when, if you gotta replace something, or you're looking at another process, when you have other people on your staff that you can go to, that helps you run the plant more efficiently, but it also helps us understand, the value added to PERC. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion there? Okay.
Public comment?
Okay, public comment, please. Anyone? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment. On to item 3, 2020 capacity plan recommendations. Fluid storage terminals, sizing, duty, and disinfection.
Yes, as we start moving forward, one of the things that we'll need to be looking at is effluent storage requirements. If you'll recall, in the 2020 capacity plan that was done by Dexter Wilson, he is identifying that the city will need approximately 220 acre feet of storage in the future, especially if ponds 6 and 7 are required to be lined. Then we have no percolation. We'll need to go to storage. And in addition, headworks upsizing and UV disinfecting, and I'll let Brett talk about the headworks upsizing a little bit in terms of the need.
The headworks is probably the smallest lift station the city has. We've got other lift stations throughout town that are a lot larger. That's really undersized. It overflows, requires portable pumps to be put in during the winter,
Right.
just because it's just way too small.
It's I&I mostly related?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, the grit removal and rag removal is minimal at best. The grinders that are being used are hardly ever spec'd in any job anymore. It's always some sort of screening to get rid of it. And the grit removal that we have there is just a little pit in the channel that has to be cleaned out on a semi-regular basis.
And that pit removal, is that like, is it, like you say grit, is it actually grit or what is it?
That's sand, heavy material that settles out from the flow.
Okay, all right. And where are those at? Where are they located in there?
They're at the wastewater plant by the pump station, before the pump station.
Okay, are you recommending we have those elsewhere also, or?
No, just have a properly engineered and sized grit removal at that point.
Okay.
Normally it goes into some sort of either tank or
Settling tank.
something, and then is screwed out to a classifier that moves the grit from the water.
Okay.
Dumps into a big bag, plastic bag. Same with the rag removal.
Yeah.
It goes up a chute with a spiral auger,
Mhm.
and it kind of compacts the water out of it and drops semi-dry discs,
A screw press, out kind of like that?
pretty close to that, into another plastic bag. So you'll have a dumpster there with two separate bags in it, and that just gets hauled off on a regular basis, depending on how much you collect.
Okay. Any questions there?
We're not currently doing any of those things, right?
Right now, we have the grit removal, which is inadequate, and right now we're chopping up rags and throwing them right back into the clean ponds.
Wow.
So
So,
both those units need to be rebuilt. The infiltration and the sand from the rain, yeah, the sand just wears those cutters out.
so the INI is part of that process, I guess, of the problem, I guess, is that
Yes.
safe to say? And then, do we know, I mean, I know we've had this camera before, I know some of it, but do we know exactly where all that's coming from? And do you have specific areas we've isolated that we know that these are worse than others? Because it all collects in one spot, so we don't know if it's coming from which trunk line or what.
Not at this point. We have identified some manholes that had a lot of I&I, and last summer had those
Yeah, I recall.
coated and repaired. And we've got other areas we know that have issues. Cracked pipes are causing, we haven't really did any kind of flow study on it or anything yet.
I suspect too, there's probably a lot of it, I would suspect from the older parts of town where the laterals to the homes still have clay pipes and they're cracked, and then I know at one project I worked on,
In the old part of town, most of the main lines are clay.
Right,
So every
exactly.
3 feet, you got a joint that has potential to leak.
yeah. And we've got a maintenance process we're going through, replacing them over time, that's kind of the goal. I mean, some of this, yeah, I mean, if we go do a bunch of work on it, we need to figure out, I guess, what would be the most efficient use of the funds, if we should replace the places with INIs most serious, and then fix that down on the other end, because if we fix it, like you say, if it destroys the equipment faster, we could replace it, there's no kind of, you know, so.
But that's not gonna help with the headworks upsizing, I
No.
assume. That still is something that we have to evaluate and look at.
Right, but those kind of tie into it as far as the grit and rag removal. That's part of the headworks upgrade, because that equipment's before the pumps.
Yeah.
So you want to get rid of all that debris
Mhm.
before it gets to the pumps.
Is that, there's a lot, some of this just, I wouldn't call this a new technology, but new use of different types of products. I mean, like the tucks seem to be a relatively new thing. I don't know how long they've been around for a long while, but it seems like that's becoming a problem.
The what?
Like the rags that are getting in the system.
You know, that's an ongoing problem everywhere, and that's why they're all going to screens when they spec out a new job. It's just-
Is that a relatively new thing or something?
No,
for 20
no,
years?
it's been around for a long time.
Okay.
It's just getting used more and more when places are upgrading or new construction.
Interesting.
Well, there's more and more
Had the same
rags
thing-
and paper, right, that is going in.
We had the same issue with Lodi when I worked there, and we had grinders, same issue. Round them up, spin them back, they'd fall up again and cause problems. And they put in screens and compactors, and there hasn't been a rag issue since.
Hmm.
Everything a 1/4 inch and smaller,
Yeah.
or larger, is removed.
Yeah, it sounds like something, I mean, it sounds like it's something you can do.
Well, I have a question, because it's kind of like where do you go first? Is it best to repair for I&I at the back end, or should we invest in the front end at this point and upsize, put in the rag removal, do the grit, and then deal with the I&I? Which, I mean, from your perspective, would you
From an
recommend?
operational standpoint, the headwork should be done first. Because if not, you fix all the I&I, you're still having the issues with the rags and the
Right.
grit, getting to a brand new clean pond.
Okay.
It's better to have that stuff removed first and then find out where the I&I is.
Okay.
And then I guess then what would be the order next then would be effluents. Well, effluent storage has to be done one or the other, I guess, so it's not really a comparable thing, but it's something.
Correct, that one goes down the road. As we start talking about this, and I'll jump a little bit in terms of, to the UV disinfecting, one of the things that I've talked with our engineers about, and I've talked with Brett a little bit in terms of the Community Development Block Grant for non-entitlement communities has just opened up in the state of California. And we've been talking, or I have been talking with our grant writer related to looking at headworks upsizing and UV disinfecting as a possible grant application. The non-entitlement portion for the grant is, projects of up to $3 million are allowed. Headworks upsizing maybe $1 million, $1.5 million. So I think, the UV and the headworks together would fall within the financial parameters of the block grant program. We need to do a little bit of the engineering work as part of the block grant to be able to show the reviewers that, here's what needs to be done, here are the cost estimates, how everything is going to lay out. So again, as we start talking about doing these things, this is the one that in terms of a priority for the city, in my mind, that's where we're kind of headed now in terms of spending time to focus on the block grant application for the wastewater project. Again, I want to say, just because we submit a application doesn't mean we get funded.
No.
But again, we got to work to try to get that application in so that we are eligible for funding.
What's the time frame on that grant?
I have to go back and double check. Like I said, I was just told it was came up yesterday, and we had a conversation, and I have to review all the information and then talk to the engineer in terms of what needs to be done from that standpoint. So I will have a better update for you next month.
Okay.
Yeah, we look at too with the grants, what are some of the things that we can do ahead of time? Because sometimes they have requirements that we have to meet that we're not meeting or.
And like I said, that goes into that, and some of the, the way we phrase things might seem a little odd because there's a strong emphasis in preparing for housing. With California housing crisis, everything, so we may look at it in terms of preparing for the future in terms of additional housing, where we have the Q Ranch, the Ringer Ranch, and the other properties that are in the sphere of influence that have a residential component to that. We may be looking at trying to list this project as a way to prepare for that housing in the future. So like I said, part of doing grants is somewhat being creative and getting your projects to fit the criteria. Wastewater infrastructure, and especially with housing, I think we have a natural fit there. But again, I need to spend more time with our grant writer in order to flesh out all the details, and again, to have the engineer come up with the cost. I believe it's a 5% match for that grant. And again, kind of, you've heard me speak about this before, the UV disinfectant. I mean, that's something where we're going to have to get to. So like I said, if we're looking at projects, we need to incorporate that as well. It makes no sense to do chlorine in terms of disinfecting or chemicals like that. UV is much more efficient. And like I said, that is the way everybody is going, and that's where we need to get to. I'm sorry to repeat myself, I believe I said that in the last meeting.
Sounds familiar.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You can just keep saying it, it's fine. Is it up to $3 million, or is it $3 million?
Up to $3 million.
Up to, so they can be anywhere between
Right.
$1 and $3 million.
Right.
Okay.
But we'll always estimate cost on the high side.
Right.
There's a real push for high density residential, trying to get more housing and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. But like I said, in order to do all that, you have to have the infrastructure to handle all that. So that, like I said, there's an opportunity for us.
Okay, I would be very interested in the timeline on that grant. So if you can get that information for us for the August meeting.
Right.
And then, do we Do we have any idea of costs for this headworks upsizing and the equipment that you're discussing?
I have my office looking into it to get a rough estimate on that.
Could you, would the August meeting, would you be able to report back on what that may or may not cost?
Most likely.
Okay.
And like I said, it's just gonna be a rough design estimate.
Sure.
Our engineer gave a ballpark estimate between $1 million and $1.5 million.
And, you know, does
That's
PERC,
what mine's thinking of too.
Yeah.
has PERC done any of these recently elsewhere?
A lot of their facilities, they've done the headworks.
Yeah.
When they do a complete design build.
Have they done one of those recently?
They just finished 2 projects. I'm not sure if they're MBRs. It's a different kind of removal process. I could check and see if they're conventional and get you more information on those.
Yeah, because you have some size and some cost comparisons that might give us a more real dollar figure estimate of what we're looking at.
I told them to figure it out for a 1.5 million flow,
Okay.
so you'd have room in the future. Definitely.
Right.
Yeah, you don't
No,
understand.
we don't want to go for just today.
Anything else? Public comment? Seeing no one, close public comment. On to item number 4, post ARSA.
Yes, Chairman, committee member. As you are aware, in 2022, ARSA will be leaving the tertiary plant, and there will be a need for an additional 200 to 250 acre feet of effluent in order to meet the golf course needs of anywhere between 500 and 550 acre feet per year. One of the discussions that we're having with the engineer, and this is one of those things that have been discussed, is looking at running effluent from the wastewater plant to the tertiary plant and looking at what that may be in terms of a cost. And if it's possible, that may be tied in with the grant, or the community development block grant. Like I said, we got to see how we can package all this. But I know that when we submitted the letter to ARSA, the owners of the golf course were a little nervous as to, okay, how's the city going to ensure that there's the necessary amount of effluent coming in to make sure that the golf course is able to meet their needs. Like I said, that's something that needs to be in the back of our minds as we move forward. Like I said, right now there's a discussion related to the possibility of taking some water from the wastewater and going to the tertiary. And again, that's where I think the UV system would be very helpful in terms of running it through UV before it goes to the tertiary plant, just as the precautionary measures. Also, we're having discussions with CDCR. One of the things that we want to make sure is that they understand that we're still expecting 350 acre feet. Now, I haven't heard anything in terms of the permitting process for Woodard Bottom, but my understanding is CDCR or produces about 500 acre feet of effluent a year, and if need be, the tertiary plant could take all of that. And in terms of discussion with them, because I know this has been an issue that's been brought up related to the contract for the prisons about tertiary operations, is that they can run the tertiary plant too. If everything of theirs is going to the tertiary plant, they can run the tertiary plant. Again, beginning preliminary discussions. I know CDCR also wants to make sure that they're able to submit or send effluent to Woodard Bottom. But in terms of where that process is with the state, I haven't been a party of that too much. The other thing that we're talking about with CDCR about is capital improvements needed to the tertiary plant. ARSA and CDCR have been using the tertiary plant exclusively, and it's come to the end of its pretty much life cycle in terms of some of the components, and we need to start having conversations about upgrading those and bringing new life into those, especially if the city of Ione is going to start using part of that tertiary plant. I mean, they've all used the life expectancy. It should be brought up so that when we come and start using it, there is adequate life expectancy for the ratepayers of Ione. They shouldn't have to modernize something that they haven't used in the past. So those discussions are ongoing, and I will keep you informed as that continues to move forward.
Brett, what has been the flow from CDCR? What are we taking right now for tertiary water?
Right now, I'm running 600 gallons a minute.
Okay, and does it come mostly from primarily from CDCR right now?
No, right now, we're taking it from ARSA until we hit 300 acre feet. Then we shut that valve, or have them shut that valve, open up the valve from CDCR and take 350 acre feet more.
Okay. And does CDCR, do they just store their water right now? Then they have fields irrigating their own, but I mean.
Yeah, they have a reservoir that they're storing it in.
Because if they're producing, are they producing 500? Do we know how much they're producing? They canceled the meeting yesterday again for the.
I think they're right around 400,000 a day.
Okay.
That's about 480 acre feet a year.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious with all, I mean, the prison's basically populated now, so it's full, but I wasn't sure if that had changed. Because they put in a whole bunch of water saving, technology and whatnot to reduce flow. And I wonder if that all bore out in reality or not, because when they were overpopulated, they were producing a certain amount, and then they had this new prison that was supposed to be more efficient, and they upgraded a bunch of other systems trying to figure out if they actually made their mark. So I think they were producing, was it 550 before, right around there, if you recall?
Okay. Acre feet?
Yeah. Before, when they were over capacity a few years back.
I don't have that up.
I can't remember.
Off the top of my
I was
head.
just curious. I was just curious what it ended up, and that's kind of what we need to base off our going forward number from, is what they're actually producing at full capacity, if that's where they're at. Like I said, the meeting didn't have us, I don't know what the capacity is right now. It's been close to full, but this is the second one they haven't had or announced.
Was it 2 years ago, they were way over.
Yeah, for sure. Any questions or comments, council? All right, public comment? Okay, seeing none, close with the comment. I think the big thing here is that we just got to figure out, as we draw near, kind of what it's going to look like and get our plan together. Any comment from our, so they're here today? No? You guys on schedule, I guess? Last meeting I was at, looks like you guys are moving forward and everything's steady as she goes, or?
Steady as she goes with applying for a grant.
Yeah, right, that's fine. That's what I'm asking. Yes.
Time-consuming process.
Yeah.
Could I have you speak into the mic in terms when you answer questions? That way
I
it's
don't want to
being.
answer any
I know you don't.
questions.
I get it.
Good morning, my name is Amy Getty. I'm the city manager for the city of Sutter Creek and also the ARSA general manager. The city of Sutter Creek has submitted a grant application for a plan of study for its wastewater treatment plant. And we are a little over a year into that process and are hoping to get the contract executed by the end of the year,
Okay.
is what we're told. So we're moving forward, and then our intent will be to do a design build project so we can expedite the construction and get that moving forward as quickly as we can in terms of the 2022 deadline that John mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming down. I want to say that too, because it's good to keep communication going, especially with the committee here, kind of
Yeah.
they're steering this thing. But so you guys are on target, you think? Then is that what it's looking like, or, as far as you know?
As far as we know, I mean, there are a number of pieces that need to fit in the puzzle. The city of Sutter Creek has also begun a rate study. So we're underway to look at incorporating anticipated future costs to operate the tertiary treatment plant. And so we're hoping to have some preliminary results and presentations in August and September, knowing that the rates will increase. We just, don't tell the public that yet. We're not quite ready to reveal any numbers. We don't know yet. We're just kind of gathering that data. But our real hang-up right now is just getting that grant application finalized with the state for our planning study so that we can look at options and get possibly an NPDES permit for discharge into the Sutter Creek, seasonal discharge, etc. So we're kind of going through, we have a number of options moving forward, but we are pushing forward.
This is, they asked the question, that's what I was just curious. Are you hearing any pushback from the NPDES process yet? I was just curious if anybody's concerned about water in the creek, or has that even been?
Actually, the state staff has been very helpful and just kind of outlined, you know, you're gonna have to do these anti-degradation analysis, you're gonna have to go through that process with CEQA as we go through this plan of study. So they've been very helpful in pointing out some of the pitfalls, but, you know, working with us to kind of identify what we will need to do in that report.
Yeah, I was just curious, because I know we have monitoring stations up and down the creek. We'll probably have to add more, and I'm sure you guys will too, just to figure what background looks like, and then what any changes that take place. And that's kind of what we've been fighting over for years, is, you know, what they are accusing us of, not what's real, but that's just, you didn't have background information, so they.
Right.
So if you don't hit your Plan A deadlines and timelines, do you have a Plan B as to what that's going to look like for the city of Ione and the water that we're getting?
Our plan, well, we kind of we're working through plans A, B, C, and D, really. But we think that we'll have those more defined as we develop our plan of study. We think that some other things will emerge in terms of downstream water users, landowners, that could be a possibility. So we're just kind of working through some of those options. Our city, or our ARSA attorney, she had gone back through all of those contracts, and they go way back on a handshake, and so we've kind of had to go through some of that. You know, our operator keeps those water troughs full, just that was the handshake agreement back in the late 70s. I was living a whole different lifestyle with my parents at the age of 6. I mean, so it's kind of one of those things where we're just kind of, a lot of those things are bubbling to the surface, and facts and issues are emerging, so we're just kind of working through our way through some of those issues.
Well, if at some point you are going to need to remain with the city and the water needs to go somewhere, we would like to know that sooner rather than later. We would like to have some discussion and negotiation on what that's going to look like.
Do you know, like, the time
Thank you.
frame? Design build, what do they think that's going to take, a year and a half or two? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out a time frame, like if the 2020, you know, mid-June or July, we need to start talking to you guys about what the future's going to hold, because it's not going to be done. That would be probably pretty critical for both of us, I think.
Yeah, I would kind of reserve a comment on that. We're just.
I was just curious, yeah.
Yeah,
I
we're
understand.
kind of working through some of those. Again, I think once we get going on that plan of study, we're anticipating moving pretty quickly. I mean, I submitted the original application in June of last year.
Yeah.
So we're ready. We're gonna have a professional services contract to get our engineer on board to develop that request for qualifications or
RFQ.
for the design build team. So we're gonna be anxious and ready to get going as soon as we sign that contract.
Yeah, I know it's fits and starts. It seems like it just takes forever, and all of a sudden it's going full bore. I get it. So I know we're just.
We're hurrying up to wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I just want to keep kind of communication open so that we're not running into each other later on. We can have, keep on top of what's going on.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate you talking. All right, very good. On to item number 5, site lateral and information help on website.
Yeah, we had a citizen come before the council on an issue that they ran into with their lateral. And I went through our webpage, and there's very little information available for the public as to how they're supposed to deal with this situation. Who owns it, what's their responsibilities, what's our responsibility, all of those kinds of things. We are not, at this point, responsible for the laterals, so it is the homeowner's responsibility. But I do think as a city, we can provide information to them as to what they can do when they have a problem. I've looked at a bunch of other cities' websites, and they do offer that kind of information. They do offer that kind of assistance. So I've asked John if he could look into getting some more information put up on the website. If you have this, do this. If this happens, go here. That kind of thing. And we can cannibalize somebody else's website and use their same profile and all of that.
You're right, and we will be moving forward with that. You're correct. There's a ton of things that we can put on that would help property owners understand their responsibilities. And again, just in terms of if you have a lot of vegetation in your front yard, normal type of maintenance things that you do once every 2 years, such as having a rotor-rooter come through just to run through your lateral, just so to ensure that nothing does build up over time.
Right, yep.
I mean, part of it too is putting down root killer and stuff too, if you have one of those. Is there a way, I don't know if this is possible, because you can't really expend public funds on private properties, but with the grid and I, that clearly it impacts the entire system. Would there be some way that the city could, I don't want to say contract with necessarily, but is there a way that we could like pool a bunch, because there's a bunch of laterals that need replaced. My neighbor's replaced his, I watched him do it, it was crazy, ordeal. He thought it was 2 foot deep, it was more like 6 or 8 foot deep, so he's down a little trench trying to dig the thing out. But and his line isn't the only one, but is there a way that we could contract with or get a hold of some replacement company and kind of give people a per price per foot, maybe a reduced rate or something? We did a bunch of them. Is there some process or mechanism we could get there with? Or?
One of the things in terms of thinking along that line, I would like to suggest, I'm sure there's something that could be done in that area, but what I'd want to focus on is to do that when we're replacing older sewer lines. And then that way, once the new line is in, new lateral gets put in as well. So, and again, that's tying that all together, so, so somebody is not replacing their lateral, and then a year and a half later, we're coming in and replacing an old sewer line.
Exactly. Well, that's my thought there, is because I've had one estimate, it was around $4,000. That's a pretty heavy load for, I would say, many of the residents in parts of the town, where if we're replacing the main trunk line, or the lateral could be an addendum to that, and they could give some reduced rate or something. I'm not sure how that would work.
Well, and again, that'd be something to lay out and discuss when we start moving forward with the main replacement in terms of, but again, in terms of the thought process, adding that to the list of consideration, that is something worth considering. And again, it might be something, in some communities, and I'm just throwing this out because I know there was some discussion related to taking over the laterals or the side sewers. You don't want to go onto other people's property, but if you are replacing the main and you run what will be called the lateral to the street, put out a clean out there, and then from the clean out to the house or the building is then the property owner's responsibility. So again, as we start trying to move forward, identifying where those clean outs are. If I look at my property, the clean out's up by my garage, which is 20 feet away from the street.
Mine's about 4 feet from my front door.
Yeah. So again, if you're going to look at replacing the old, and again, we're talking the old part of town because that's kind of what's needed. If you're looking at replacing that, then that type of a program, like I said, where you put cleanouts at the property line, and then again the city takes that over because there is a way to get to the clean out in the public right-of-way area. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. And I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's much more of a fair way of dealing with them than, in the middle of the street where they can't even get to it without going through 10,000 loops and everything else.
Okay, another discussion? Public comment? Here we go.
If you look at the old part of town, even yours, there's a clean out on the property line. The city used to have you do that when they used to put the lateral in for you. You had to put a clean out on your corner of property. That was part of hooking up. Been that way for years.
Thanks, sir. All right, any public comment? Seeing none, we'll close with comment on to item number 6, independent contractor, second opinion.
This was brought forth by Councilman Rhodes. He sent an email and he wants to have us look at the possibility of, I'll just read it. Pingsby are doing a sewer study. May I suggest at this point that we start getting some second opinions on subcontractor work that PERC hires out for jobs they are incapable of doing. What would be a good example is the lift station at Castle Oaks has a generator that PERC says has a transfer switch that needs to be changed out because it's not legal. I recommend getting an opinion from Jim Ulm, as he lives in Ione and is an expert in this field. or any other generator company that you may suggest. Also, an example of ABC Plumbing, they're doing all the camera work, and most cities, the Councilmember Rhodes makes the point that most cities do this in-house. In the Public Works, does their own camera work, root cutting. Sutter Creek apparently is doing this, according to Mr. Rhodes. So, in looking at the contract, which you'll be happy to know I read several times, there is a fund, which is, in fact, I am the maintenance fund that I'm meeting with PERC on Friday, that addresses the contractor work. So any of the contract basically gives this contractor the ability to sub this out. We do not have oversight on that. The contract does not allow us to have oversight on that necessarily. I did ask John if he could have Sophie look at whether or not we can do this, or if it would be considered contract interference. I don't want to put us in a position where we're at odds with our vendor. You know, they're running our plant. I want to make sure that we have a relationship that's functional. And to do that, I want to make sure we stay within the parameters of the contract. So if Sophie comes back and says, you're in your purview to do that, then that is something we may consider doing. But I will say, I personally would not recommend doing this unless we extend the contract with PERC. At this point, the contract is due to expire in 1.5 years, give or take. And if we're going to extend the contract, yeah, let's take a look at their costs. Let's take a look at how much money is being spent through this fund and what contractors they're using. Are they the appropriate contractors? And great, but for me to do it now seems premature in regard to that piece of it. The other thing is we have to look at every single contract that they use. So if they're using somebody for, if it's ABC Plumbing, we have to look at ABC Plumbing. If they're using Lou Yeager, we have to look at Lou Yeager. We can't just pinpoint certain areas. We have to look at every single contract, is my understanding. Otherwise, we are targeting companies within the community, and that's not okay. So that's my understanding, but I did ask for Sophie to give us an opinion on that.
And she will be here next Wednesday.
Okay, and I'm, like I said, I have a meeting on Friday with about the maintenance agreement that the maintenance fund that we have, and once I have a better understanding of exactly what that means, we can address this again. I think we can take another look at it.
I'd like to comment on that.
Yes, please.
When I hire a contractor, I pretty much do it like the city does. I call several contractors to get the best price that benefits PERC and the city. As far as the line cleaning, the contract says provide or self-perform. So we used to do it. We'd have to rent a truck, bring people in for it, and I ran a cost analysis on it, and it was actually substantially cheaper to use ABC Plumbing to do that work, is why we switched. So the lift station issue, Castle Oaks, it's not a transfer switch issue. It's a wiring issue to have the generator actually provide power to the programmable logic controller that controls the pumps. And that's also being looked into by the city and myself. Is not completed yet.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you, if that's been taken care of yet.
No, we're still working on it.
Okay.
And also the city inspector also is involved, just to make sure we got the codes right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right, public comment?
Just a quick question. If we do this in-house, we pay the cost to the subcontractor. If PERC does it and they hire the subcontractor, are there any additional fees above the cost of the subcontractor that are charged to the city?
Not that I'm aware of. We are paying the cost through this fund. If we go out, if we as the city request something out of scope of the contract, at that point, then PERC is entitled to additional costs. But so
Okay.
far, we have been in scope.
I was more interested in supervision, because over the years, our staff has had to supervise any subcontractor that came to town. And that was at a cost to the taxpayer ratepayer. Apparently PERC's doing the same thing, but they're absorbing the cost for the supervision.
That's my understanding. You are supervising your subcontractors, you are
Absolutely.
managing them as the work.
Correct.
The city of Ione is not doing anything in regard to that. Other than what we would have to do.
But I'm in contact with the public works superintendent on what's going on all the time.
Right.
That's supervisor.
Information, you're informing us, we're not managing it.
No.
And by ordinance, the Public Works Director does go look at things in terms of projects.
Which makes sense.
Yes, because then he reports back to me.
Okay.
So
Does
there's
that-
no economic value as far as us doing it or having PERC get the contractor and doing the work.
Well, there would be economic value because we're not advertising, doing a bunch of,
Yeah.
in our process, so there'd probably save $1,000 per contract, I would guess, because we'd have to, every time we put out.
We would have, yeah, every time we do something like this, we would have, put an RFP out, we would have to, the staff involved in creating it, managing it, approving it, and then monitoring the subcontractor as the work is being done.
And PERC does all that at no cost to the city.
That's correct. It's part of their contract.
Thanks.
Any public comment? Seeing, here's one, okay.
I could be wrong, but don't they get, when they contract out, don't they get the 10% of that cost?
Only if it's out of scope. If what the city is asking for is out of the scope of the contract,
You mean regular cleaning, he don't get 10%
No.
more on that bill?
no.
Really? Okay, we'll see about that.
That is the contract, as long as it's in the scope of the contract, they get no additional cost.
Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Any further discussion?
Nope.
All right, meeting's adjourned, thank you.
Next meeting is August 8th.
Yeah, next meeting is August 8th, not the 11th.
We are not doing meetings on Sundays.